This is the story of the Shadow Pages. The four of us, Alex, Chloe, Ethan, and me, Mia, were stuck at Northwood High. It was a Friday night, and a brutal thunderstorm had rolled in, cancelling our plans. We were supposed to be studying for AP History, but mostly we were just killing time in the library, waiting for the rain to let up. The old Northwood Library was massive, with towering shelves and a musty scent of ancient paper. It was a building with more secrets than its books. Everyone knew about the back section, a roped-off area locked for decades, full of books that were too old for circulation. Ethan, being the thrill-seeker he was, had a key he'd swiped from his dad, the head janitor. He joked about finding the school's ghosts. We laughed, but a nervous energy hummed beneath the surface. "Come on," he whispered, motioning to the heavy wooden door. "It's now or never." We followed him, our flashlights cutting through the gloom. The key scraped in the lock, and the door swung open with a long, drawn-out groan. The air in the back room was colder, heavier, and smelled like dust and something else, something sharp and metallic. Rows of leather-bound volumes lined the shelves, their titles faded into unread oblivion. Our lights landed on a small, solitary table in the center of the room. On it sat a book, its dark leather cover completely bare. It was strange. It didn't look old or worn, but it felt ancient, heavy with a silent history. Alex reached for it, but his hand stopped mid-air. A faint, low hum filled the room, a sound so subtle it felt more like a vibration in my bones than something I actually heard. "Guys," he said, his voice a little shaky, "I think we should leave." Chloe, always the logical one, scoffed. "Don't be a wimp. It's just a book." She grabbed it. The hum intensified. The cover was blank, but as she opened it, the pages were pristine white. Then, a single line of text appeared, scrawled in black ink. We all leaned in, mesmerized. The line twisted, new words forming and twisting with a strange, liquid motion. We didn't understand what it said, but we all felt a sudden, collective dread wash over us. The humming grew louder, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the floorboards. The pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, a whirlwind of blank paper. We tried to close it, but our hands couldn't grab it. It was like trying to hold smoke. We were hypnotized, trapped in place by the sound and the sight of the self-writing book. We felt a pull, a strange distortion of the air around us. And then, the lights went out completely. The last thing I saw was the cover of the book slamming shut. When my vision returned, the room was different. The shelves were twisted and warped, the books nothing more than dark, skeletal shapes. The air was thick, heavy, and silent. There was no thunder, no rain, just a pervasive, oppressive stillness. Chloe was gone. I could feel Alex and Ethan nearby, but they were silent. I called their names. The only answer was the faint whisper of my own voice echoing back, distorted and distant. I shone my flashlight on Alex. His face was pale, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked at me but didn't seem to see me. He was standing completely still, facing a wall. I reached for his arm, but as my hand touched him, he disappeared with a soft hiss, like air leaving a punctured tire. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real. I turned and saw Ethan, his body convulsing slightly. He was staring at the book, which was now open on the table again. the pages flipping slowly. On the pages, I saw what looked like a blueprint of the library, but the lines were shifting, twisting into grotesque faces and shadowy figures. A soft rustling sound came from the corners of the room. The shadowy figures on the page began to crawl off the paper and onto the floor. They were just blobs of darkness, but they were moving, slithering closer. I had to close the book. I had to. I ran to the table, my feet slipping on the dusty floor. Ethan was muttering to himself, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "They're here. They're waiting." I ignored him, my eyes fixed on the book. I lunged for it, but just as my fingers touched the cover, Ethan's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice cold and impossibly strong. He stared at me with empty black eyes. "Don't," he hissed, his voice not his own. "It wants you to read. It wants all of us to read," I screamed, pulling away with all my strength. I managed to break free, and he fell backward, his body dissolving into a cloud of black dust. The dust swirled and reformed into one of the shadowy figures, its form a little more defined now, with a gaping maw and long, spindly arms. It reached for me. I slammed the book shut. The moment the covers touched, the room shuddered violently. The shadowy figure froze, then dissolved into nothing. The humming stopped. The library returned to normal. The lights flickered on, and I was alone. No Alex, no Ethan, no Chloe. They were gone, just gone. The book sat on the table, its pages blank again, the cover still bare. I wanted to burn it, but something stopped me. A voice in the back of my head, a cold whisper, told me it wouldn't work. The book had a life of its own, and it was waiting. I ran out of there and didn't stop until I was home, safe in my room. My parents found me sobbing, but I couldn't tell them what happened. They wouldn't believe me. The police searched the school, but found no trace of my friends. The only thing left of them was the memory of their terrified faces and the empty spaces they left behind. I still have nightmares about the cold grip of Ethan's hand, and I can still hear his voice, not his own, in my head. Sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I think I hear the faint hum of a book opening. This is the story of the final bell. The rain had been falling for hours, a relentless, drumming sound against the roof of Northwood High. I was stuck in the auditorium with my drama club friends, Sam, Chris, and Lisa, after a late rehearsal. A sudden, violent thunderstorm had knocked out the power, and the school went into lockdown. We were just killing time, huddled together on the stage, telling ghost stories to pass the time. It was supposed to be a fun, memorable night, but the air felt heavy, charged with a strange, nervous energy. We decided to go exploring. As we moved through the darkened halls, our flashlights cutting through the gloom, we came across an old classroom in the B wing. The room was always locked, rumored to be haunted. It was an unofficial challenge among students to try and get in. Sam, ever the daredevil, managed to jimmy the lock with a credit card. The door creaked open, revealing a thick layer of dust and a scent like old paper and something else, something cold and metallic. We stepped inside, our footsteps muffled by the dust. The room was frozen in time. Desks were arranged in neat rows, their surfaces covered in a fine layer of grey. A blackboard still had notes scrawled on it, the chalk fading into illegibility. "This is creepy," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. Chris, always the skeptic, tried to lighten the mood. "It's just an old classroom, guys. The school probably just forgot about it. He walked to the blackboard and was about to draw a smiley face when a sudden, sharp tapping sound echoed from the front of the room. It sounded like a piece of chalk hitting the board. We froze, our flashlights trained on the empty space. Nothing. We told ourselves it was the wind, the old building settling. But the tapping came again, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then a low, guttural murmur filled the room, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a chorus of faint, whispering voices, too distorted to make out what they were saying. Lisa whimpered and clutched my arm. Her phone, which had been working just moments before, suddenly died. We all checked our devices. They were all dead, despite being fully charged. Panic began to set in. The whispers grew louder, and then a chilling, childlike giggle echoed through the room. We swung our lights around frantically. The desks, which had been perfectly aligned, began to scrape against the floor, shifting position as if pushed by invisible hands. I saw the shadow of a small figure dart across the far wall, a fleeting silhouette that was gone before I could focus on it. A sudden, cold gust of wind swept through the room, though the windows were tightly shut. It carried with it a scent of flowers and old wood, the faint perfume of a time long past. The whispers intensified, becoming clearer, more desperate. I could make out distinct words now. Help me. Don't leave. It's coming. The blackboard began to write on its own. Lines of chalk appeared as if drawn by an unseen hand, forming a question. What happened on March 15th, 1978? A second line of text, written in a different, more panicked scrawl, appeared below it. They locked us in. We were trapped. The door behind us slammed shut with a sickening thud. The lock clicked, and we could hear the sounds of heavy chains being wrapped around it from the outside. The room shook, a low rumble coming from the ceiling. We looked up and saw cracks spreading across the plaster. It was happening again. The roof. It was going to collapse. Chris, who had been frozen in terror, suddenly ran toward the door, screaming and pounding on it. Let us out, please. But there was no one there to hear him. The whispers had turned to screams. The small, childlike giggle was replaced by a guttural, desperate wail. We heard the sound of footsteps, 100 tiny, frantic feet running across the floorboards above us. The ghostly figures, once just shadows, began to take on a faint, translucent form. They were children, terrified and crying, their faces contorted in silent pleas. They ran toward the back of the room, pointing to a stack of old textbooks on a teacher's desk. We knew we had to find something, some answer to this terror. I grabbed the books and began flipping through them frantically. They were all from the late 70s, their pages yellowed and brittle. I found a student's diary, a small black notebook hidden at the bottom of the stack. I opened it to the last page. The entry was dated March 15th, 1978. It spoke of a substitute teacher locking the students in the room for a fire drill, a cruel prank gone horribly wrong. It ended with a frantic scrawl. The fire alarm is ringing. No one is coming. The roof is giving way. We are screaming. The bell is ringing. The final bell. Just as I finished reading, the room was filled with the deafening sound of an old school bell, tolling over and over, its ringing a funeral dirge for the lives lost. The room began to shake violently. The ceiling crumbled, and dust and debris rained down on us. The ghostly children were screaming now, their voices a cacophony of fear, and pain. We felt a weight on our shoulders, a crushing pressure. The bell rang one final time, a single, mournful clang that echoed into silence. And then, everything was still. The dust settled. The room was as we had found it, old, dusty, and silent. The power came back on, a soft hum of electricity filling the air. Chris, Sam, and Lisa were gone. The diary was gone. The old classroom was once again just an old classroom, but the air was still heavy with the scent of fear and a faint, sweet smell of flowers. I was alone. The police found me huddled in the corner, unable to speak, my hands covered in dust. They never found any trace of my friends. The school administrator. This is the story of Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. Moving to a new town in the middle of junior year was tough. I was the new kid at Northwood High, a sprawling campus that felt more like a prison than a school. The hallways were a maze. The faces were all unfamiliar, and the only thing that felt remotely interesting was the ghost story I overheard in the cafeteria. It was about the girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor. Everyone called it the broken mirror room. The story went that if you stood in front of the cracked mirror at midnight and whispered the name of a girl who had disappeared years ago, her reflection would appear behind you. A silly high school legend, I told myself, but something about the low, serious whispers of the girls telling the story made my skin prickle. They spoke of a girl named Sarah, a student who vanished without a trace in the late 90s, and how her spirit was trapped in the glass, forever waiting. My first 2 weeks were lonely. I spent my lunches in the library and kept my head down in class. The isolation started to get to me. One Thursday night, I was up late studying, feeling restless, and I remembered the story. The idea of a personal challenge, of proving to myself that I wasn't afraid, was more compelling than the fear itself. So, a little after midnight, I got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and put on a hoodie. I lived close enough to the school to walk there without a car, and the streets were completely silent. The school was a dark, hulking shadow against the moonlight. I found an unlocked side door, a lucky break that felt less like fate and more like a warning. The moment I stepped inside, the air went cold. The silence was thick, pressing down on me. My footsteps echoed, each one a sharp, loud crack in the stillness. I made my way up the stairwell to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding in my ears. The bathroom was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, and I pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, but a faint moonlight filtered in through the grimy windows, casting long shadows. My flashlight beam found the mirror. It was old, tarnished around the edges, and a single, jagged crack ran from the top right corner down to the bottom left. The crack itself seemed to pulse in the faint light. My hands were shaking as I stepped in front of it. The reflection staring back at me was pale, my eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I took a deep breath. "Sarah," I whispered. The name felt strange on my tongue, almost like a curse. The moment I said it, the air in the bathroom dropped a few degrees. A faint scratching sound came from inside the walls, and the crack in the mirror seemed to grow darker, like a spreading bruise. I could feel a presence behind me, a cold emptiness that wasn't there before. I quickly turned around, but there was nothing there, just the empty stalls and the cold tile floor. I laughed nervously, a short, sharp sound that felt wrong in the heavy silence. "See?" I said to my reflection. "Nothing. I was about to leave when I saw it. In the mirror, behind my reflection, a figure stood in the darkness. It was a girl with long, dark hair, wearing a white dress. Her face was a blur, but her eyes were two black, gaping holes. She wasn't solid, but a shimmering, indistinct form. And then she smiled. It was a slow, deliberate movement, a chilling grin that widened unnervingly. I screamed, scrambling backward, my heart about to explode from my chest. I fell against the bathroom door and fumbled with the handle, desperate to get out. My reflection in the mirror was still screaming, but the girl behind me was now laughing, her laughter a dry, rustling sound, like dead leaves. I managed to get out, slamming the door shut behind me, and I didn't stop running until I was home. I hid under my covers, trembling, convinced that what I had seen was real. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, brought on by fear and the late hour. But as the day went on, I started to notice things. Every time I looked in a reflective surface, a window pane, my phone screen, even a spoon, I saw a faint, distorted glimpse of the girl with the dark eyes, always just on the edge of my vision. The real terror began that night. I was trying to sleep, but I could feel a presence in my room. The air was cold, and I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping. I looked at my bedroom door, and there it was, the figure of a girl standing in the darkness. She wasn't solid. She was a shifting, wavering shape made of shadows. Her face was still a dark blur, but I could see the two black holes where her eyes should have been. She moved closer, and I could feel the temperature in the room plummeting. I pulled the covers over my head, but I could still hear the sound, a raspy whisper right next to my ear. "You saw me. Now I see you." I spent the next few days in a fog of fear. I couldn't look in a mirror, and I avoided reflective surfaces at all costs. But the girl was always there, a flicker in my peripheral vision, a shadow that moved when I wasn't looking. I knew I had to go back. I had to face her, to break the curse I had brought upon myself. That Friday night, I returned to the school. The moon was full, and the campus was awash in a pale, eerie light. I walked straight to the third-floor bathroom, my legs shaking with every step. I pushed the door open, my hands sweaty. The air was cold, the same unsettling cold I remembered. I stepped in front of the mirror, my reflection a pale ghost in the moonlight. I took a deep breath and looked directly at the crack. I whispered, "Sarah, I'm here. I'm sorry." The room went silent. The cold air began to swirl, and the crack in the mirror pulsed with a dark light. The figure of the girl appeared behind my reflection, her face now clear. It was a face of profound sadness, her dark eyes filled with tears. She raised a hand and placed it on the mirror. My reflection did the same. Her touch felt impossibly cold, and a wave of pure sorrow washed over me. "You can't leave," her reflection whispered, her voice a hollow echo. "You're with me now." I felt a sudden, sharp pull on my arm, and I saw her hand, a pale, translucent hand, reaching out from the mirror, grabbing my reflection's wrist. The crack in the mirror began to spread, splintering into a spiderweb of lines. I felt a searing pain, a cold fire spreading through my arm. I screamed and pulled back, tearing my arm away from the mirror's surface. A sharp shard of glass flew off, cutting my hand. The reflection in the mirror was now a distorted mess of shattered glass. The girl's face was still there, but it was twisting and contorting in anger. The laughter returned, a sharp, piercing sound that filled the room. I ran, leaving the bathroom and the broken mirror behind. I never looked in a mirror again. Every reflective surface is a potential window to her.